There are more marketers than ever before on this mountain, but what's so important about Davos from a marketing point of view?
Well, I think from my point of view, I am bound to talk about some issues regarding trust. Trust, I think, is always a theme of Davos. And what we're seeing, obviously, increasingly, is that companies really do want to ensure they are trusted. It makes a big difference to their business, and it's very hard to have trust without communicating the right kinds of things about your company. And I think a lot of marketeers come here because, they are figuring out, and I think in a good sense, the kind of values, the kind of beliefs that are holding sway, and that they need to figure out whether those are the kinds of beliefs and values that they as a company feel comfortable with, feel suit them, and that they want to start communicating about.
Are you facing a wall of distrust these days?
We saw last year what we described as a crisis in trust. It certainly hasn't got better. And actually, there are some real issues now for marketeers, for CEOs, around the fact that people have really got a crisis of trust in social media.
No, and I think what's encouraging is that the wake-up call around the trust gap is now clearly in the minds, certainly of all the major CEOs that we have a chance to talk to. The thing I've heard over and over in every meeting I've had so far this week is leadership. There's just a real consciousness that there's a leadership gap with the trust gap. And I don't think I've ever seen business leaders more insecure around what it takes to be a leader in today's environment.
So what is trust?
Through 18 years, we have distilled our trust measure down to a question of, to what extent do you believe that this business or this institution, do you trust it to do what is right?
But why is understanding trust important?
We look at trust in 4 main institutions that really govern and support people's lives. So businesses, government, media and NGOs. We look at trust in particular because we think it's a really forward-facing metric and predictive of how people will feel in the future compared to something like reputation, which often can be past-looking.
Globally, trust levels have barely changed over the last year. Trust in governments rose just 2 points.
At that global level, institutional trust remains the same. That masks some really big country differences and real polarisation of trust. There's lots of interesting movements between countries, so we see lots of activity going on with trust in the US and some big trust falls in the US market, but other markets such as China, we see some real trust increases in their institutions, government, media, businesses. So countries are often moving in different directions when it comes to trust.
The responses suggest there are real concerns when it comes to fake news.
Nearly 7 in 10 people globally say that they are worried about fake news being used as a weapon. We see 63% of people saying that it's difficult for the average person to tell the difference between fake news and real news. So there's this collection of findings around how people feel about finding the truth, about finding factual information and evidence-based information.
Hi, my name is Marketing.
Influencers have been an increasingly important part of the marketing mix, but the survey suggests the influence of influencers could be on the wane.
Peer-to-peer is still a very influential and credible spokesperson, but we're seeing a drop. So they definitely still play a role, but we have seen a slight decrease. Another key finding from this year is really the rise of the authoritative voice. And we're seeing a real rise in academic experts, in technical experts. We've seen a record rise in CEOs as a credible spokesperson and journalists too. We have to sit up and listen and take notice of people's desire for facts, for evidence, for more information-based delivery rather than opinion, of which it can often be difficult to tell what is from a credible source and what is not.
There's better news for news organisations.
traditional media and online-only media combined is up by 5 percentage points to 59% trust level. And trust in platforms, so a combination of social media and search, is down 2 percentage points to 51% this year. So normally those track together in terms of how people trust media. We don't see a difference, but this year we're really starting to see a divergence in how people trust journalism compared to platforms.
Much of the data looks at changes from year to year, but there are some interesting longer-term trends too.
We looked at the data and saw this real inversion of authority, whereby it used to be people at the top of society, the opinion leaders, the really informed group would set the pace and the mass population would follow in terms of an attitude or a behaviour. What we saw a couple of years back is this real dispersion of influence, and that's been something that's continued throughout the past couple of years. Last year we talked about trust being in crisis, and we are seeing that continue through into this year. We have low levels of trust in the institutions that we look at, and this year, you know, this battle for truth is coming through very strongly, but it is in the context of a low trust environment.
Hello, I'm James Wright. Thanks for watching Marketing Media Money. To check out more online videos, just click on the boxes and don't forget to subscribe to the CNBC Live channel at the bottom of the screen.